I am Bob Longbaugh of Alton. The way I've heard tonight is that HUD is a bunch of bullies, that we, New Hampshireites who send so much money to Washington don't want any of it back, that regional planning commissions are a big waste of money. But what I have not heard tonight is what is the impact of workforce housing on Alton. Will our tax rate go up 60%? Will our rural character be now changed to 6-story tenements filled with undesirables? What would be the impact on Alton?
Good question.
I think Ken and I probably both chime in. I don't know, who knows? But the truth is that whatever zoning we have in Alton, whatever rules there are, whatever laws there are, whatever we follow, should belong to Alton. And they should not be manipulated. Or, in the case of Westchester County, when you trust, just because, yeah, what else? We don't have the time, and they're the federal government, and we're going to trust. Well, that didn't work out so well for Westchester. And I think that we should learn from the mistakes of other communities. I just don't trust the organization, myself, to come into Alton and have any say in our community's right to zone as we see fit.
I agree with Representative Cormier. It's definitely a local control issue. And if you want to try to figure out what the impact will be to your community, you have to think about how many more people will move in because of the changes to your zoning laws. You'll have an impact on your municipal services. You'll have more stress placed on your schools. Now, any community in the state will be able to absorb some of that. But at some point, you then need to expand. And when that point is reached, it becomes exorbitant.
Thank you again
We'll
from...
give you a chance to comment. Other people have their opportunity.
I'll just share with you, there was one, Wyandotte Mill was a river front development in Rochester, and I didn't share this with you, and I thought I would. Maybe what will happen to Alton, we don't know. Again, this is some of this was implemented in case somebody came in and wanted to do something. So they're like ahead of the ball, wanting to develop their ideals for the rural development of Alton or the town of Alton. But what happened in this particular development was for the elderly, our grandmother, Mona's grandmother, who was 90s, in her home all for a week before she died. In that community, when she was there, it was for elderly people, but because it was money that came from the taxpayers through the government, it is now, anybody can live there, probably low income. But in there now, the city of Rochester has one apartment that a police officer is in 24/7, that all the time. The people who are elderly there don't want to be in there. The drug thing in New Hampshire, and I gotta tell you, here is a challenge. Workforce housing didn't bring any relief to that town, I can tell you.
Barbara Howard. In my past, my last job before I work where I work now, I worked with developmentally disabled people, adults, and I helped them to become homeowners by using their Social Security income and their agency, area agency budgets. And that program actually was closed, and I was instrumental in helping it to close, because what was happening is that these people were getting homes with federal deposits with 1% and 2%, some of them 0% interest. And even with all of those resources, which are all generated from us, it wasn't working. And so, you know, on the one hand, I'm an advocate for people with disabilities, and I am the first one to part with my dollar for someone who's in genuine need. But if you want an eye-opener, take the phone book and look at New Hampshire government and see how many pages of agency after agency after agency. And here in New Hampshire, just recently, you know, we have a lot of issues with Medicaid-funded programs and people in need and not getting enough, and, you know, and all of that. Well, the state just added a whole nother layer of bureaucracy called managed care. And so now that is an added burden, which is going to bring me to there's one other point that I wanted to make. While I was in my last job, I know, sorry, will you entertain me for another few seconds? Is that okay?
Go ahead, we've got others, so real
Yeah.
quick.
Yep. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac were the driving force with HUD and New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority to provide training for all of, you've got Laconia Area Community Land Trust, Concord Area Community Land Trust, there was Nashua Housing, there's NeighborWorks of Greater Manchester, there's Dover Housing, all over. You go online and look, just take a look. And that all was generated under the premise of everyone should become a homeowner. And because of my role, I wasn't necessarily working with the folks that were taking advantage of all of that, but there are thousands of people in New Hampshire that got low interest, they got federal grants, state grants, all taxpayer-funded grants to help them to be able to afford their homes. And simultaneously, the second they were in the homes, these are people that were 3 years ago in bankruptcy. And so it was just colossal. We were all saying, what is going on here? And then, of course, we saw the housing bubble coming way before it came. My point is that...
Can you make it?
Yes.
10 seconds or
10
less?
seconds.
There's other people that want to...
I'm sorry, thank you. My point is that instead of HUD subsidizing $900,000 to all these regional plannings, they could use that money to better serve people who are truly in need. And then, that's my point. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that everybody gets their first chance.
I just want to ask one quick question. As happened with Rochester, I've heard, if I heard him correctly, that the county actually overrode the town. Can that happen in our town here? If, suppose we vote one way, whatever way we vote, and the county says, no, that's not the way, and their people in the whole county votes a different way.
You know,
Well,
I don't
is it a
know.
loss?
I don't know. I tend to think that right now we're early enough in the game that we can try to make a change and get our voices heard, and that town's votes will be respected right now. But if we don't wake up, who knows where we'll be 3 steps down the road to where some entity will come in and say, no, we don't think it should be that way, and this is the way it's going to be. I think we're early enough in the process that if we really make a statement that this needs to be reworked, this isn't working. That's just my thought. I don't...
Could you easily the mic?
I think what Rick said is that the Regional Planning Commission and the Granite State Future Program was voted down in Rochester, but the Regional Planning Commission is still moving ahead with their plans to plan for Rochester.
Yes, and to verify that, what happened was that, they asked communities to sign on to that Granite State Futures, which was that Regional Planning Commission. While the Stratford County Regional Planning Commission got the money, whether the city of Rochester signed on or not, they would still use that, again, taxpayer money, stimulus money, to manipulate and educate the citizenry to make sure that it comes out to their end result. And whether we sign on or not, they were going to use the money for it anyway. And that came from the HUD gentleman that came and spoke. So even if you don't sign on, they're going to put that money to this community anyway and try to force you to do it. But what you all are doing is being proactive and saying, we don't want it. You already said it once on the ballot. Let's put a warrant article and this time defeat it again.
I don't know about anyone else, but I'm curious about something. We have members of the Walton Planning Board, and I think one member of the Selectmen, I believe, and other officials. I was wondering what your thoughts are with regard to the presentation by Mr. Erie. Is that right? Irie, excuse me. I know at least one of the members of the planning board doesn't think the federal government is involved in any of this, but I want to know from the planning board members and the selectmen of Walton, do you think what you heard tonight is factual? Do you believe it? Does it concern you? Because in the end, it's going to be a lot of voting by you people, as well as by the residents, the taxpayers.
My thought on it is it's a bad law and it needs to be changed. It's too convoluted, the way politicians and lawyers like to write things up. And it's a bad law. We, even as the board, has some serious questions about, well, what does this mean? What does that mean?
I think questions like that would be better posed at meetings such as tomorrow evening, an open discussion with the planning board.
But not everybody's going to be able to make that meeting. I would think the people here have a right to hear what their local planning board feels, unless you disagree. You have to hold our people accountable, whether they're elected or volunteers.
I'm just curious, what had the...
Roger, you're up to speak up.
Can you come up to the mic?
I'm just curious if the Westchester paid the $37,000, would they be in the predicament that they're in? If they had paid $37 to have somebody come in and teach them about the whole thing, would they?
They made a deal with HUD. We did not make a deal with HUD. No.
By signing that grant.
Well, and I guess that would be my second question. Did we make a deal with HUD? You can't just say we did.
Where'd the money come from?
It was that one little thing that he showed you, it was plain, it was the actual agreement on the supplemental supporting document. And it was clear that they had a mandate that was in the acceptance of that grant document, whether, I mean, you can't refute the words on that document, it was very clear.
Was that for Alton?
Yes.
Is that online?
Is that the question on the floor though from this gentleman?
Well, generally, what these people feel, the local planning board, and what they feel about what they heard tonight, are they in agreement with it?
to town hall and get a
Because it's going to
copy.
affect, I would imagine, their decisions when they meet as a board.
Well, I did enjoy the Westchester, what was he?
Westchester.
County.
Yeah, I enjoyed his report.
The grant agreement.
Is anyone concerned about it on the planning board?
The question is to the planning board. Can we give them the opportunity to respond? Thank you.
From the point of view of a member of the planning board, I think there's a great deal of confusion about what is being proposed. We are looking at workforce housing. The last two presenters talked about low-income housing, rental housing, and other things. Nothing to do with workforce housing. Workforce housing is a house. It's not a unit. It's a house. And no, the proposal is for workforce housing as proposed by the legislature, which in their wisdom wrote this. The concept that we had presented by this gentleman here, who said that we have to do something, we do have to do something. Unless the town wants to be open to a lawsuit. So all I can see that we want to do at the present time is to cover ourselves and put the onus on the developer so that the cost of doing all the assessment comes from the developer.
Can I just make a statement, because that's, wowie zowie. You know, could I ask you, Mr. Hoops? No, I know, I'm just wondering, I mean, you've been on the RPCs for quite a few years, correct?
I was the town's representative for the Lakes Region Planning Commission for 8 years. I
Okay.
was the secretary for 3.
Okay, so you do have an understanding of how this works, sir. You absolutely do, because you've been sitting there for a lot of years.
I have a first-hand understanding, not a third-hand understanding.
Okay, so let's look at the workforce housing RSA 674:58 definitions, because it's clear that there are affordable, which means housing with rental and utility costs or combined low debt services that are given. multifamily housing, which means 5 or more dwelling units, reasonable and realistic opportunities for the development of this workforce housing, which is number 3, which means opportunities to develop economically viable workforce housing within the framework of the municipality. And then there's workforce housing, which means housing that's intended for sale, and which is affordable to a household with an income of no more than 100% of the median income for a 4-person household. Okay, so at the very least, at the least part of this argument, this has got to go, because you know what? This is just about everything under the sun that you could look at that they want to be able to put into our communities. It is, and that grant, sir,
Nothing to do with low income, no.
100% of the median income. It is absolutely social justice, so that an ideology to keep things even and fair to everybody across the spectrum. That's what it's about. That is what it's about.
I'd like to take a
Croc TV.